Did you ever try to follow somebody that doesn't know where they're going? First they go straight and that doesn't work, and then they go left and that doesn't work. Then they go right and you're all kinds of confused, and it's an ineffective leader. Or have you ever followed somebody in doing a task? They show up with no tools. They don't know where to find tools. They find inadequate tools. And the job fumbles, and it's just very frustrating. Well, let's not think about the negative. Let's go together and find some positive. The role of a ministry leader as a visionary. Why should people follow you as a ministry leader? Let's give that some thought. The first thing is to know where you're going. Know God's will for the ministry. As we walk through this, I'm going to illustrate a little bit about my present undertaking, which is to create tiny housing for people with tiny budgets. This is something I'm working to do in my community, and so I'll illustrate a bit with that. But knowing God's will for the ministry is a beginning point. To know that God is called to that ministry is very important. And so I began to think about this ministry and try to work at this ministry and explore some possibilities. And there was a time when I kind of gave up at it. But the very next day, God called me into it, and 10 days later initiated for me the ministry that he called me to. The point being, if it's God's will, if God calls you to do it, God will ensure it, God will accomplish it. And so knowing God's will for the ministry is very important. And when we lay a hold of that, then we can give specifics about that for what a preferred future would look like. And that's the beginning of a vision. What are some specifics of a preferred future? And then begin by providing your personal example as a leader and showing a better alternative to the status quo. And so for me, I was hanging out with people who were homeless and asking, if we could give you a place to lock up your stuff and sleep for the night for $200 a month, would you do it? Oh, yes, was the answer. And so I had a better alternative to the status quo, and it involved tiny spaces for tiny incomes. And so give your personal example of exploring these things and finding your way, how you've been led in it. And then believe that it can be done. Sort of trusting God to do it and to do it through you. Well, once you're on to the fact that God is called, now you can trust God and follow him through in it. And so if you take the time to wait on God, he will prove himself to you and begin to develop the thing, and he'll work through you. But don't run ahead. Don't fake it until you make it. No, wait until God does it, and believe that it can be done, and it can be done through you. The next thing you want to do after knowing where you're going is to show where you're going. You present that need. What is needed? It became obvious to me that instead of a single dwelling of 1,200 square feet, that could be afforded from somebody of a median income. But if you chop that into 3 condominiums of 400 feet each, you're still using the same 1,200-foot house. But now you've got 3 units that can be made available for $400 a piece, and the building still pays for itself. So I present the need. There are people out there who need housing at $400 a month. And so present the need, make that clear to your team, and make it clear as to those you're working to reach what the need is. Now share that vision. Make yourself credible with your team and with the ministry. Begin to talk about it and show how it can be done. Showing is, again, the key word. Show the present need. Show where the vision is credible. And third, demonstrate your commitment to it. Show your involvement for the ministry's best interest. Here's what you've been exploring. Here's what you've been learning. Here's what you're doing to forward this vision. Demonstrate your personal involvement, your personal commitment, and how it's best for the ministry team that you're working with. The third thing that you want to do as that visionary leader is to be passionate about your vision. Communicating God's call. God is indeed called, and make sure people know that you feel compelled or called by God. More of that is caught than taught, but a story is a good way to communicate God's call. Here's what happened to me. Here's how God led me. And how you came to the conclusion that the vision is a right thing to be a part of. That's often the way we get into communicating God's call, not only for ourselves, but for the people we want to engage. And then expose the difficulties. There's going to be opposition of the flesh or of the culture. People are always going to want to do it differently. So the folks I talk about with low-income housing, they're talking about building the same great big apartment, the same great big place, and renting it out by securing government funds or grants or all kinds of possibilities without showing the integrity of a person with lower income who wants to pay his own way. So expose some of the difficulties. People are going to say, it can't be done, or it's being done in a lesser way for fewer people. Expose those difficulties. And then avoid manipulation. Don't try to coerce people into what you're doing. That's counterproductive. Don't try to hog the workload, but rather share it. Give an invitation for cooperation. In the end, that will multiply like mad. So for me, with regard to tiny housing and ownership of housing, I talk with the Habitat people. They're putting up those 1,200 square houses. And I'm just saying, you could triplex that to 400 square foot units. And the last meeting I was at, the Habitat leader said, maybe we'll do a triplex for our next application of home ownership. So we can multiply, we can spread that news. Recently, I helped a really low-income person move into a small rental place. And the person she's renting for wants to put up a lot more rental places on his property. I said, well, why don't you go tiny? Tiny cares for more of the lower income people, but it gives you the same return on your investment. And being a godly man, he listened to me and he's motivated to think the way I am. Multiplication. If God's into what you're doing, God certainly wants to do more of it through more people. And so it gets exciting to be impassioned and to watch God multiply his good heart and his good word among many people. May God bless you in these things. Get excited. Know what you're about. Show what you're about. And be passionate about your work. That's the work of a leader, to be visionary. May God bless you in it.